Welcome to my first long form video or audio if you're listening to this as a podcast. My name is Monica, or you might know me as MG Hunt. That is my pen name for my writing. I'm a fantasy author. I primarily write young adult or slash new adult fantasy fiction. I'm also an illustrator as well, and I love to create the covers, graphics, illustrations, and character art for all of my stories. I'm fairly new to the self-publishing world. It's and to the whole writing world in general. It's been a bit of a wild ride in some regards, but a really exciting one as well. In my day job, I am a graphic designer, so that takes up a lot of my time as I work 9 to 5. But on the weekends, I start to really get into a lot of my writing, and even before work I try and do some writing before I head into the office. So today I wanted to talk about the selection of books that have helped inspire my writing and things like that. So I do currently have one title under my name. It's a short story and it's called Alara and the Passing. Here it is. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure you've seen all about it. It is available for purchase on Amazon. If you want a signed copy of a paperback, as well as some cute merch like bookmarks and stickers, you can head over to my Etsy store, and I'll put all that info in the details below. So, in the future, I will get into a backstory onto how I got into writing, because that's a whole story on its own, and how I garnered the confidence to get my writing out there. But that is for another day. That's probably another video slash podcast content that I'll do in another format. So today I am specifically discussing a selection of books that inspired my writing. These books that I have, and I'll hold up in a sec, these books in particular have really helped how I set up my world building and character development. And these books really help how I've set up a magic universe in particular. The books that I focus on, and my writing usually focuses on a universe that has elemental magic, which, yes, I can imagine has been done to death in a lot of types of media, but it's one that I find really interesting and I love to write. So that's where I'm coming from. A little bit about me and my reading habits, perhaps lack thereof. I read at a glacial pace. I mean it. Like, I know I've got friends out there that can go through books so quickly. I'm not one of them. I'm just going to put that out there. I am a slow reader and I'm a slow writer, but that's okay, because it's just me, and I like to take my time with things. No problem with that. I am really drawn to fantasy, a bit of romantasy as well, but for me, I'm really drawn to worlds and stories that have a lot of detail, and high fantasy worlds are usually my favorite, but low fantasy as well is something that I really enjoy, and one day I think I will write something in that world. So in my own world, I read young adult and new adult fiction, as well as create that myself. I'm conscious that my critical older adult brain might not relate to some of the themes that are popular in the young adult fantasy world, but when I read young adult, and I'm sure that's probably the same for a lot of people my age, I feel I get a sense of nostalgia reading young adult, and that's where a lot of the enjoyment of reading young adult fantasy comes from. So for me, I remember reading books like The Hunger Games for the first time when I was, in my teen years, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So for me, reading young adult does yeah, really evoke nostalgia for me. So now that I'm in my late 20s, young adult fantasy does remain my go to genre, as well as fantasy itself, but there is something really fun about young adult fiction. So, without further ado, I'd like to get into the books that have helped with my own writing and my own world building and have inspired my writing. Now, not all of these books here are young adult. I think there's probably two that aren't, and we'll get into the reasons why not in this. But for the beginning, my first book that I found really, really inspiring and helpful for my own world building and overall writing is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I adored the detail and expansive world in this book. I mean, first of all, look, the book itself is just beautiful. It's just stunning with the awesome, awesome graphics of the dragon and the flames and everything. It was such a ride reading this book. I found that the unique cultures written in the book were so different and really detailed, and that's what I really appreciate in this book. Things to do with the religion and the law within this novel. It's really exciting. And then you throw in some magic and some dragons, and then I'm hooked. Love dragons. In short, The Priory of the Orange Tree is set in a high fantasy realm, and there's a part of the world that fears dragons, and then the other part of the world worships them. I'm not going to give any spoilers, by the way. I'm just saying the outline of this book. So in this book, there's a kingdom, the kingdom of Innis, and I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. This kingdom is ruled by Queen Sabran, and this kingdom relies on her conceiving a female heir and protect the realm from the devastation of a beast called the Nameless One, who's one of the most destructive dragons in known history. What I also really, really like about this book is it features a cast of really awesome female protagonists. There's a few of them, and they go through the process of relearning their deeply held beliefs that they've had growing up, and that's really interesting to read, from my opinion. The character arcs of Eid and Tani, and I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly, and even Sabran herself, I drew a lot of connections to those characters. I think, being a female myself, I think there's something really powerful about the journeys that they go on, and I really liked how there was a collision of the two worlds. I think that was really well written, and it brought a lot of excitement and intrigue to me to see these two worlds collide with different beliefs. I'm particularly in awe of how Samantha Shannon writes dialogue. She's able to capture the unique differences of the tone and the speech patterns for each character really well. I really am inspired with how she writes dialogue. I think that that's something in my own writing personally I do struggle with, to get into that character voice writing in a fantasy world without it sounding like I'm just talking. So I do look to this book for a lot of inspiration on how to write dialogue. So I would love to emulate the worlds that Samantha Shannon writes in her book, and it's very similar to the next book that I'm going to talk about, which is Scythe by Neil Schusterman. I don't know why I have a problem pronouncing that last name well, so I apologise if I mispronounce Neil's name going forward. And Scythe, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, Scythe. This is part of a trilogy, and for this one I'm going to talk about the first book in the trilogy arc of a Scythe, and it's called Scythe. So this book is set in a world where humanity can't die naturally anymore, and there's a group of people called the Scythes that are humans that control the population by gleaning people, which, yes, that means that they are unalived, to put it like that. For me, I love dystopia. I think dystopia is probably one of my all-time favourite genres. It's me referencing Hunger Games at the start. I Haven't ventured into a lot of dystopian books recently. Of course, slow reader. Please give me some suggestions as well if there's other dystopian books that you recommend too. But I was hooked on the concept of this about people having to, I guess, cull the population by gleaning them. And of course, the cover itself I really love. And what I particularly love about this series are the themes that are explored in it. So I believe the themes explored in this series are relevant and engaging to a young adult audience. The themes are still powerful, but they're not overly complex, and that's something I do try to emulate in my own writing and the concepts that I create for my worlds. When writing, I often wonder if the themes I'm discussing are too intense for a young audience, such as death, violence, and things like that. But as I reflect on the type of books that I used to read when I was younger, like The Hunger Games, I believe I would have loved Scythe because it does grapple with themes that are not overly complex but in your face in a really entertaining way. I also really liked the sprinkle of romance between the two protagonists, Citra and Rowan. It is present, but it doesn't take over the whole book. It's a nice garnish in a way. Personally, those are my favourite types of romances in books. I know that other people really love a romance story, but for me, when it comes to young adult fantasy and fantasy in general, I like romance, but I also like it as a substitute to the main themes that are going on in this book. I'm currently working on publishing my full-length novel Still Waters Run Deep next year, and I've written that book in a way where there is a bit of romance between some main characters, but it doesn't take over the whole book. So I am inspired by the way that the romance is also written in this book and how it is just adding to the plot without overpowering it, and the themes of dystopian themes in this are very entertaining. So that's how it's inspired my own writing. Okay, moving on to book 3, which is Nevernight, from the Nevernight Chronicle by another Aussie author, Jade Christoph. So this is part of a trilogy, and for this I will be talking about just Nevernight in particular, but a lot of the talking points will relate to the entire trilogy. For the people that are listening, my book is quite beat up, I guess. A good friend of mine actually gave me this book because she, I believe, had 2 copies of Nevernight, and this one was a bit water damaged in her bag. She offered it to me and I said, yeah, why not? And it was actually the first fantasy novel that I had read in a while, because I hadn't read for a long, long time in some regards. And this was the first fantasy novel that I read many years ago that really got me into fantasy reading, and also made me, kind of inspired me to just get out there and go ahead and write my first novel. So for those who haven't read the Nevernight Chronicles before, it features I think 16-year-old protagonist named Mia, and she resorts to violent vengeance for what has happened to her family. Although Mia is a teen, I don't believe this book is classified as young adult due to some of the adult themes in the book. So that's just a warning there if you're not interested in that kind of stuff. There's probably new adult. It's, probably there's a lot of heavy themes in this book. In particular, I take reference to how the author, Jade Christoph, writes Mia and how she navigates some heavy situations. This book is dark and it's gritty, and it's completely different to some other school and training books that I've read before. The Red Church, which is an institution in this book, certainly makes hardened individuals. You have to be pretty strong to find the training area and be an acolyte. Acolyte? You have to be a student in the Red Church. So you have to be strong to get there, and then you have to be strong to survive there. Kind of, in a way, linking to another book that I had read recently, The Fourth Wing. I really enjoy like a school training world, and there is one similar to that in the book that I've written, Still Waters Run Deep. I can see parallels to how I wrote the underground group called Vellum in Still Waters Run Deep to the Red Church in this book. So I know that when I was writing it, yeah, there was some inspiration that was taken from the training assassin academy in this book. In particular, I think J. Christoph is an excellent writer. Every single sentence is carved with so much detail, and every single part of this book is a joy to read. There are little footnotes as well in this book that are, fantastic. I feel like all the books that I've read by him are filled with so much control and mastery over the English language, and J. Christoph really crafts each sentence with a lot of nuance and weight and care, and that's so inspiring for an upcoming author like myself. In my opinion, he is like a gold standard in writing, and yes, compared to a lot of people, I haven't read a hell of a lot of books, but the way that J. Christoph writes is incredible, and I'm still trying to get through his other series. Empire of the Vampire and Empire of the Damned is the next one, so trying to get through that. And it's fantastic. So definitely would recommend this to anyone that hasn't read it before. But finally, just going back to the protagonist, Mia, her morally grey complexity with the romantic relationships that she has around her and the additional relationships that she has with herself and her family is really interesting and well written in general. I really enjoyed also the brutal and fascinating ride this novel took you on. It really does tug at your heartstrings, but J. Christoph writes like that, and I think it is awesome. It takes you on a ride. 10 out of 10. Okay, and finally, we've got another young adult book. This one, Shadow and Bone, which I'm pretty sure most people have heard of. It was as my copy does say here, a Netflix adaptation. I'm talking about the first book in the trilogy, but this one is number 1 in the trilogy, and for the most part, I'm focusing on the first novel. I really enjoyed how Leigh Bardugo writes the female protagonist, Elena Starkov. Again, hope that I'm saying that correctly. I found the descriptions of how Elena acquired her magic to be quite interesting, and it has run some parallels into how I created my own magic universe and discovering powers and things like that. Really enjoyed the world building in this book, particularly the Dark Divide and the divide between the kingdom of Ravka and then the Unsea Shadow Fold. I think that was really cool. It was different to a lot of books that I've read. This series takes a lot of influence from, I think, Russian folklore and mythology. I haven't read anything similar to this, so I found that to be a really interesting part of the book. It does take elements from mythology based in our own world, but the book does put a high fantasy spin on about a magic system and elemental magic. I think that I could probably employ a lot of the techniques done in this one, and also, these 3 do have pretty strong religious or doctrines and mythologies that embed themselves into the fantasy worlds. I think that that's something that I would like to try and work on, is developing more of the lore in the worlds. And I think I take a lot of influence from this book, Priory of the Orange Tree, and Nevernight for that reason. So there we have it. Those were my picks for the books that have helped me most in my writing. There are many more books out there that have definitely influenced me in my writing. So there are many more stories and bits of media, like games, television shows, movies, that have also contributed to my writing and influenced my writing and all that. But talking about books, these were the top ones that I could think of that directly helped with my writing and creating fantasy worlds. Recommendations that you think I should be looking into. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me talk about my 4 favourite books that have helped with my writing. If you're interested in following me along on my writing journey, I will link my Instagram and all other kind of social medias below. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Substack, various other social media accounts, which I'll link below. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely day. Okay, cool.